On today's episode 9 of Sculpt N Create, I'm chopping it up with someone who's got a powerful story and an even more powerful mission. Meet Anthony Palacin, a mental health educator, coach, and flow state specialist who's all about helping people break free from limitation and step into their highest performance. Anthony's path, anything but typical, from battling bipolar disorder and overcoming psychosis to naturally getting off antipsychotic meds through education and lifestyle transformation. He's proved that deep personal work can unlock real change. What makes him even more unique, though he's French, he was raised in North Africa and never followed the traditional French path. No French schools, no French jobs, just a life shaped by global perspective and unconventional experience. He's got a free course dropping soon, a book in the works, and a strong belief that education should be accessible to all, not locked behind a paywall. So if you're into conversation that challenge the norm and help you elevate mentally, creatively, and personally, this one's a must. Let's get into it. Welcome to Sculpt N Create, where fitness fuels creativity in helping artists, entertainers, and other creators towards their physical, personal, and career growth. I'm your host, Trea Da Fit Artist, and who I have with me today, Anthony Palacin. He's a focus and mental well-being coach. Welcome to the show, Anthony.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Set your links out where they can find you, who might want your services, and so forth.
You can find me on my website, which is a UK website, www.palacin, that's palacin.co.uk. And I'm also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. You can have a search for my name. Connect with me there.
As we get into it, man, let's start where you're here. Talk about your background, where you're from, who you are, what you do, how you came into what you do, and then we'll expound on the conversation from there.
Sounds good. So I'm living between France and the UK at the moment, but I've spent some time in the US and I grew up in North Africa. So pretty diverse background. I actually got into personal growth because I was a bigger kid. I was on the border between overweight and obesity when we look at BMI, and I was just so held back by this that I did everything that I could on my own power to get into a better shape, feel better, and get more success in my relationship and in life. And that has then led me to continuing the personal growth, discovering entrepreneurship and the neuroscience of flow states, which have actually helped me with my mental health issue. I was diagnosed with bipolar 7.5 years ago, and I'm happy to say that now it's been 5.5 years since I've had an episode, and I'm also 120 days antipsychotic medication free. And I've been doing this, I've been able to reach this goal because of personal growth, self-education, learning, and just constantly working on myself.
Glad you had an issue and you were able to persevere through, and then that even inspired you to be in the person you are now and helping the people that you are helping now. So I definitely commend that. I definitely like to hear those type of origin stories and so forth. So with let's kind of like talk about that, and then we get into more of what you was doing, what you do for us, your coaching. So how did you navigate from being a weight kid going through bipolar disease? Like how did you get, to where you are now, where you overcame everything?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That's a huge topic, but I'd say I discovered one subject at a time. At first, it was nutrition, then exercise, then psychology. I found a deep sense of purpose somewhere along the way, partly because of my own passion projects. And that got me to the entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship itself is a personal growth journey. And as I was specializing in my coaching, I discovered the neuroscience of flow states, and that became my specialism training that really amplified all aspects of my life. It didn't just help my focus, productivity, and efficiency. It helped me sleep better. It helped me eat better. It helped me prioritize exercise even more than I was already doing, and just amplified everything in a positive way. And it helped me also heal from some wounds and get over some of my low-level addictions. Like I was really into drinking and partying and all this, and finding the neuroscience of flow really helped me tap into a natural alternative to get the same kind of
tell
high
my clients
feeling.
is definitely when you work out, when you eat a certain way, this definitely help with your mental state in some ways, but is also the other work that you do to help you with your mental state, to help in everything other aspects of your life, and whether you in work, personal life, and so forth, so you can definitely be more productive and live in life a more optimal way other than the physical. So when you talk about flow state, can you explain that? What is that? What it's about, and what does it do? Being in your flow state, that is.
Absolutely. I think this is something that a lot of artists are and creatives are familiar with. So flow is a state of consciousness that we can get into, and it's the state in which we completely lose the sense of time. We get so absorbed into the present moment and so absorbed by the activity that we are doing that hours can pass by. The activity itself feels effortless. It feels good. And it just feels amazing. And we get a lot done in that state.
I can think about when I'm writing a song myself, and you get into this mode, and where like, okay, that song, the process that you get once you find an ideal and you go into it full heartedly, and until you just come out of it or until you just finish it, and everything. Would you say that's a part of flow state? And also, how can you get into that regularly, like where you are being productive, not only just on the creative side, but just in everything that you're doing for you, working and everything else?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. A lot of creatives with creative projects are able to tap into flow quite effortlessly because it combines all of the things that lead to flow. So creativity and pattern recognition are a part of it. Having a specific and clear goal, like the tangible outputs of the creative activity you're doing, whether that's writing a song, creating an artwork, or a piece of content, all of this is a specific goal. And it's usually something that the person is passionate about and it's related to their purpose. So all of these things put together, they're dopamine triggers, and they allow your brain to come into the present moment and really enter and sustain being in the flow state. But beyond those activities that get us, let's say, naturally into the flow state, there are ways to train ourselves, both philosophically and from a productivity techniques point of view, to get into flow states on activities that don't necessarily lead us to a flow state naturally. And I can talk a little bit about that as well. So a strong sense of purpose kind of covers all of the activities that you do that relate to that purpose. And there's a lot of mindset work that can be done with purpose. Like, to what extent does washing the dishes or cooking a meal relate to your purpose if you have the idea that work is your purpose? How you think about this question can help you enter a flow state when you're doing the dishes or cooking a meal. But besides that, there's also other tasks that are definitely tasks that you really never get into a flow state for. Maybe it's accounting, or maybe it's looking at your KPIs and numbers. And this is where the productivity techniques come into play. Some things like being able to separate how you're going to do a particular task from actually doing it means that you're going to define the clear goals and define the process you're going to go through in such a way that it's going to give you that dopamine without necessarily having it from the activity itself. So you can use those techniques in order to drive that dopamine. But it's also related to awareness. There's a flow cycle, and we go from one state of consciousness to another. mental recovery is a part of it. Actively paying attention but not being in flow is a part of it. And flow is also a part of it. And then recovering on the back end of flow is another one. So having an awareness of this cycle, whether you were just in a flow state or whether you were not in a flow state, then allows you to give your brain what it needs in order to direct your state of consciousness towards flow when you need it.
Being able to tap into it, like as you say, like on and off, not just when you kind of get a inspiration or motivation to do. You can be able to tap into the flow state no matter what you are doing or pursuing. Right? Okay.
Exactly. Over time, you can build triggers in your life and kind of condition your brain to tap into the flow state in a very similar way as Pavlov experiment with the dog and the saliva and the bell. A lot of people heard about this experiment, and you can do the exact same thing for yourself and entering flow states. And this is part of what we call flow triggers. And on the one hand, we have flow triggers that help us enter the flow states. On the other hand, we have flow blockers that take us out of the flow states, which we need to either minimize or completely avoid. And when we put together all of the principles from the teachings of flow science, we get a whole picture that helps us internally cultivate what works best for us, what doesn't work so well, and helps us amplify that over the long term.
When you're in the flow, it definitely helps you to be productive, and I guess with some kind of focus. But in this return, does the flow state help with more focus, or is that something like that you had to do separately to get the focus as well, in accordance with the productivity part of it when you're in the flow state?
So it's a multi-pronged puzzle, and I say this in the sense that sometimes we get carried away by the dark side of flow states. We might be working on an activity that we really enjoy and takes us into a 4-hour flow state, but that was not the goal of the day. The goal of the day was actually to get other stuff done. So we need to also learn how to not be in a flow state when there are other activities that need to be prioritized over the activities that make us easily in flow. At the end of the day, it's all about finding a balance, and what flow science gives to people who are able to study it, cultivate it, practice it, it just helps them free up more time and energy into their day, cultivate focus more effortlessly, and helps prioritize health and well-being in addition to everything, without forcing ourselves, without burning out, and without really relying on discipline or willpower.
You mentioned energy. So how does it, being in a certain mental state, give you energy? Because you, like I said, you think about working out to get the energy. You think about eating a certain way to get the energy. I always tell my clients, food is fuel, so they'll give you energy. So tell me, like in what way, once you get into this flow state and directing it towards something that you are needing to do, not just something you want to do or you see it as a passion of yours, something fun, but not necessarily productive, and you get that focus. But tell me, like, how do you get energy derived from being in the flow state or in a certain mental faction?
So flow can happen in any activity. It can happen during physical activity. It can happen during mental activity. The point is, when we learn how to use flow to our advantage, we're not overpowering our brain with forced productivity when what the brain needs is to recover. And that's where taking breaks and doing things like meditation, yoga, exercise, having food, having water, these are breaks that will mentally recharge you. What a lot of people do is when they take breaks, they're actually on their phone or they're checking emails. So they're going from one task to another with a mental break in between. that isn't a real mental break. And what that does is it overly forces the stress chemistry in your brain, and it forces you to pay attention to what you're doing, but your body is naturally craving a rest. And so you just go down in efficiency. Better to take a proper break, be fully on or fully off, and recharge in order to tap into flow and be more effective, because in the long run, you'll get all of the tasks done faster and feel better. So that's what it's about managing.
Real break and not just a break from what you're doing, looking at your phone and so forth. What is turning off, or what is a full break? What did that look like? Like, name some things that could be.
Yeah. The way I teach flow is it's about understanding states of consciousness and what different brain circuits are doing. And you don't need to get to individual circuits, but just having an idea. If you are working on a creative task that is on the computer, then you've got your work mind on, you've got your creative mind on, you've got your eyes that are on the screen. So a good break on the back end of that kind of task would be to go outside, get some sunlight, or sit down, close your eyes, and just reduce the stimulation. If you go from one task that is creative on the computer to another computer-based task, that's not a break. So it's about kind of that spectrum of what parts of your brain are you using, and do you have an awareness of how much longer you can use them without dipping in terms of effectiveness.
Like, I can be on the computer doing some work, and then I'm doing something else on my phone for its work, and it's two different things that I'm doing for its work. So it's not really like I'm taking a break, like you say. And so definitely have to like think about that more. And would you say, if you are getting off your stream, maybe watching TV or looking at a book or something like that, still, would that be considered active rest, or taking a break, or fully, like you were saying, like closing your eyes, going outside for some fresh air, or whatever? I'm just trying to think of like other ways that you can take a break as well. Okay.
Yeah, the idea is about being fully off. So we're living in a world which is very in that gray area between not fully on and not fully off. So we're always multitasking. We're always got our mind pulled in so many directions, and this is not good. Any amount of consumption, like looking at text messages, emails, social media, watching TV, watching Netflix, none of that is mental recovery. Anything but that would be a decent example of mental recovery. I talk about things like doing your dishes or cooking food as partial recovery, because although it still uses your brain, it uses it in a different way than work or screens. So if a full break would be going outside, meditating, and doing breath work, and it doesn't have to be long. It can be 5 minutes. It could be 2 minutes. But the point is, you're not working, you're not looking at a screen, you're getting your mind off of the previous task. If that's a full break, then doing something like cooking or washing dishes or household admin, that's kind of a partial break, because it takes you off of the work side, but you're still engaged in something with maybe a little bit of movement. And that kind of gets your blood pumping, not as much as exercise, but it's somewhere in that spectrum. And the whole point of understanding flow is about figuring out, it's not binary, it's not whether I'm fully in work or I'm fully in a break, what kind of break should I do? It's also about managing the in-between.
Now, on the flip side of that, so let's say, for instance, you ain't taking the breaks. You're maybe not in a flow state, but you're in a constant grind state where you're doing this and doing that, for whether it be career related, you at home dealing with the kids, family, whatever you got going on. What happens if you're not really taking a break for your mental health and managing your day-to-day activities, not being in a flow state, taking no breaks, what would happen if you are not doing those practices?
For most people, if they keep going the way they're going, it's a negatively reinforcing cycle where a little bit of inefficiency at work leads to a little bit of a slower performing brain, a little bit more tabs open, and all of these little bits accumulate, and it creates a negatively reinforcing spiral. So whether you're just missing out on a lot of time that you could have back, or a lot of energy that you could have back, or mental clutter that can be completely eliminated, or inner peace that can be cultivated, all of these are what can be done when we learn how to cultivate flow. At the very least, like the worst case scenario is unlocking more time and energy by just making little tweaks in your understanding of your brain and your understanding of how to work more in alignment with how the human body was designed. And so that results in the positively self-fulfilling cycle of you'll get more time back, you'll get more energy back, you'll be able to focus more easily. With that focus, you'll be able to get into a flow state more easily, and that flow will lead to the self-fulfilling results of creating, again, more time and energy back into your life. So overall, flow and the ability to cultivate more flow in your life leads to a self-fulfilling cycle. You get more time, you get more energy back, you're able to focus better because you can recover your brain faster or more efficiently. That lets you tap into flow more often, and tapping into flow helps you become more efficient, and becoming more efficient helps you unlock more time and energy. And so this whole effect compounds on itself.
Let's talk about who you work with. What the type of people that you currently work with now, and like kind of talk about some issues or ailments that they come to you dealing with focus or mental health.
Yeah, I'm working a lot with spiritual entrepreneurs, typically creatives that have a strong sense of purpose or strong passions, that are typically struggling with overwhelm, mental exhaustion, and a lot of clutter in their mind space. And I help them eliminate that clutter and perform at a higher efficiency so that they can live in more flow and achieve their goals faster and more easily.
And in what ways do you help with that? Because like I said, when you say creatives, definitely can think of the artists and entertainers. They constantly grinding on the road. They creating things. They performing. So their mind is in a constant frenzy when it comes to getting tasks done. It's relatively mentally draining as well as it is physically draining and energy draining as well. So how do you help them navigate this within their schedules and within their day-to-day and everything like that? So how do you help in that manner? Like what ways or what steps do you do in getting them there towards being in that flow state, towards being more productive and being mentally sound as well?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing that I do is I help them with the training to get into a flow state. Figure out how their balance is between their work, their life, their goals, how much flow they're experiencing currently, and whether or not they have the skills to maximize their potential. One of the first thing I do is a holistic evaluation. I look at their sense of purpose. I look at spiritual connection. I look at mindset, self-belief. I look at motivation, and I look at productivity skills like focus, being able to single task, their ability to define clear goals, their sense of overwhelm, all of this stuff. And from there, we have a roadmap of what skills are lacking, what can be trained, and proceed with the highest efficiency of what principle from flow or neuroscience can start to be cultivated right away in order to achieve more focus and more efficiency. And then on top of that, there's other parts as well. I can help with spirituality, lifestyle, relationships, but that all comes as a part of the balance that flow represents.
Okay, gotcha. Do you have any stories like of a person that you helped, like or the person that you helped, with a great story that they have overcome one of their biggest challenges and stuff like that?
Yeah, there's a creative spiritual entrepreneur who had a lot of projects and was constantly beating themselves up for not making progress on all of the things that they had in their mind. And this constant cycle of frustration, of not seeing progress, actually impacted their ability to get work done. One of the big things that we worked on was reframing goals, productivity, and mental recovery, and created a workflow for them that helped them see things in a different way. And it led to turning that frustration into ease. They were actually able to put some projects on the back burner and stop worrying about whether they are completed or not, and focus on the things that mattered, while at the same time making progress on secondary projects from one priority to the next. And now they have the workflow and the lifestyle that works for them in order to achieve goals. Yes, faster, yes, more easily, yes, but also just feeling better about themselves and the whole cycle of their productivity.
Okay. And like, how long does this like take for them to get to a certain degree when they come to you in a certain dire straits where they wits in for is navigating their focus, mental health, and so forth? Like, how long does it take? Does it varies, or do you have a certain process, like it take 3 months, 6 months for them to get to this point and so forth?
Yeah, it varies depending on the goals. Most people within 12 weeks will amplify their focus by a factor of 2 to 5, like 2 times to 5 times more focus in 12 weeks or so. And the thing is, they can cultivate their ability to cultivate that focus, then compounds on itself. So it's an investment that returns for your whole life, because I can promise that they'll free up 1 hour a day, at least every single day, for the rest of their life in a 12-week program of 1 hour a week.
Okay. All right. So, but overall, that you usually do a 12-week program, but it sometimes take longer, but it just varies on a case by case or client by client basis.
To be honest, the learning and the practice wouldn't take more than 12 weeks, but it's cultivating the principles and the philosophy that can keep compounding for life.
Okay.
Like I trained in flow back in 2021, which is 4 years ago, and I'm still growing my ability to put into practice some of the more advanced techniques. So in the 12 weeks, most of the basic things that most people need, the 20% that give 80% of the results, we can nail that. But if you want to become the best version of yourself, then it's a constant journey of optimizing yourself. And it's not just flow that you need. You need to go into depth on everything that optimizes the human mind and body.
Okay, I get you. Like I said, it's depending on what the client needs or their goal is as well. But and definitely something that can compound over time. Because I do talk about that. When you starting with your fitness goals and eating right and working out in a certain way, start off small and kind of like compound or snowball effect that to later on, because it is a lifestyle. It's not something like a phase. And it sounds like that's similar to what you are talking about. Like it's not necessarily a phase. Yeah, you do have certain criteria where they trying to get to point A to point B, but at the same time, to really have this as a on experience and a life altering path for the better, they have to put in the work daily, basically, right?
Absolutely. It's exactly that. And as you were sharing that, it made me think of something else.
Okay.
A lot of programs out there teach very specific things that may or may not work for some people. What I teach and the way I teach it is universal because it is based on biology and it is customizable to the kind of person. And I'd love to give two specific examples to really walk the walk here.
All right, cool.
So number one of the things covered in flow science is aligning with your biorhythms. So biorhythms is basically your circadian rhythm, your cycle of day to day. And within all of humanity, there are people who are more morning people and people who are more evening people, early birds and night owls, right? So depending on what kind of person you are from that perspective is going to depend what kind of tasks you're going to be more efficient at doing in the morning block versus in the afternoon block of your day. And to be specific and really give everything away, morning types are very good at the activities that require high focus and depth of analytical capacity in the morning. Whereas in the afternoon, they're better for the tasks that are more creative and a bit less intense focus. Whereas for night owls, it would be the opposite. It's better for them to start the morning with tasks that are more creative, lower pressure, so that then they can use the afternoon to work on the deep, analytical, high focus requiring type of tasks. So it doesn't matter where you fall on the spectrum of early bird to late night owl. There is a solution that actually works for you and your brain once you know about it. So it's basically about aligning with the optimal ways of working that work for you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, do you analyze that if a person is in the morning person or a night person? I kind of tend to think when for my goals, I do like to work out at night, but I know it sometimes doesn't pan out that way to work out at night. I need to get stuff done early on in the day, and so that's what I do. Does this go into effect with that, with your mental health and getting into that flow state? Whether you gotta turn it off, like say for instance, if you are a morning person, but you gotta be more productive at night, and then vice versa. If you are a night person, but you gotta be more productive in the morning. So those dynamics are switched, but like, is that if you get what I'm going with that. All right. So like,
Yeah.
So does that practice kind of affect that depending on if you that person or not?
Yeah. So we take all of that into account and we try to work for ways in order to be as optimal as possible. Sometimes it's not possible to be as optimal as possible, but we try to find the good middle ground that works for this moment and then build towards a long-term solution of a lifestyle that is optimally aligned with that person's preferences, lifestyle, biology, genetics, all of this.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. All right. And let's see. So now overall, with you being with the focus and being in the flow state and everything, can you talk to more about what ways to improve your mental dexterity, where just being more mentally sound, not just being in a productive state, for as being having more energy or flow state as well, but how can you be just mentally healthy overall?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to lifestyle. Also, depending on your past history, whether you have any traumas and psychological wounds, that is definitely something to investigate and start doing that inner work. But otherwise, the other dimension is really cultivating this ability to get into flow and not only tapping into a flow state more often. That in itself is a medicine for the mind because it brings a lot of positive neurochemistry.
Okay.
I would also add clarity on the long-term trajectory of your life. So your sense of purpose, your sense of what you are building in this life, how connected you are to all of that, and how confident you feel about the growth curve that it's going to take and the belief in yourself to achieve it between now and whenever you do. So that is all a part of it. And then within flow, we also have all the stuff from positive psychology, like meditation, gratitude. All of this is good stuff that I couldn't not mention when it comes to mental well-being.
Okay. All right. And then something that you said about psychological wounds. So do you get people that come to you with not just trying to be more productive or more focused? Do you get people like in a sense of like needing closely related to like needing like psychiatric help in some kind of way where something might be ailing them personally? And it could be, you don't have to be work related, but it could be something personally, something in their childhood that definitely negatively impact their particular mindset and focus and drive and everything for us what they do. Do you work with those type of people? Like, okay, I can see this type of issue you were dealing with within childhood, or this happened to you in your recent past or something like that. Do you work with people in that with that in that range or whatever?
So I'll give a two-part answer.
Okay.
One part is I work with a lot of people that have ADHD or that are uncertain about whether or not they have ADHD and are kind of exploring it. Maybe they've taken an online test that says, wow, you have high symptoms. You should probably get an evaluation. And actually, in the process of teaching them the techniques of flow, those scores would lower, which is exactly what I experienced in my life. I haven't been diagnosed with ADHD. When I took the diagnostic test, I landed on the 50-50 mark. But I was at 50-50 mark after years of meditating and after years of training flow. So if I hadn't done all of this inner work and meditation and flow states, I would have probably landed on the diagnostic side of ADHD. That said, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a self-taught engineer that had to work on myself because I had psychosis and I had a bipolar diagnostic and I was given pharmaceuticals that put me in a really shitty place mentally. And I was determined to figure out what can I do to make myself better? How can I know whether I will need to take these medications for life or not? And just be closer to the truth. And what I've found is a lot of learning about mental health that has helped me understand trauma, understand healing, understands that mental health is holistic. And yes, the medical system has a side to play, but so does the patient, and so does lifestyle and performance and mindset and beliefs. And the performance side is what I do to bring to people. I can help them work on limiting beliefs that are holding them back. I can help them with aha moments that are not necessarily therapy or healing wounds, because that I'm not qualified to do. But anything related to belief, mindset, performance, focus, skills, habits, and spirituality, all of this fits into the puzzle of mental well-being and higher performance.
Okay. All right. And let's talk about those two, where you talked about ADHD and then you yourself have went through bipolar. So in what ways do you help? We will start with the ADHD. In what ways do you help people who are dealing with that in being more productive, focusing more better, because I can think of maybe a lot of artists are prone to being diagnosed with ADHD, you know, and everything. Sometimes not in my experience, or foreseeable knowledge and so forth, but what I have heard, most of them are some of the most creative people. And come to the thing is just when they just super hyper focus on one thing and then just forsake everything else, and then they might not even finish that what they were super focused on, and then they go to something else. So how do you deal with them and help them out? And then we can talk about the bipolar a little bit as well. In what ways do you help with them in mending their mental state and everything with that?
Yeah, the long story short is I help them with their focus and performance.
Okay.
And this has a cascading positive effect on their life. But I want to dive deeper into ADHD because we live in a world right now where the rate of technological advancement has way exceeded our brain's ability to adapt to it. Our brains are still medieval times level brains, but the amount of stuff that we had to pay attention to 500 years ago is way, way different and way less than the amount of stuff we have to pay attention to now. I mean, we've got cell phones, we've got TV, we've got internet, emails, social media, so many people that we're connected to, so many shows to watch, so many to-do lists to cross off. This was not a thing that our brain was trained to handle biologically. So we're entering a new era. And in this era, there's a wide range of people, some of which can have ADHD genuinely, and some of which are just in a poor alignment with operating in a biologically sane way. And it results in the same kind of symptoms. So you've got people who don't have ADHD, who have ADHD symptoms because technological world is overwhelming. Our brains are more bombarded and people are more and more addicted to things like social media and escapism than ever before. So I come in and I train people in flow, and that reduces the symptoms and it increases the clarity of, for people who are unsure whether they're ADHD or not, it gives them the framework of, okay, there are skills that I can learn and train and keep compounding for the rest of my life, and maybe the focus problem will go away, whether or not I'm ADHD. But for the people who are genuinely ADHD, then flow not only has that benefit of the skill that helps with the struggles like focus, it also creates a kind of internal medicine for them. Having the skills then increases the space of understanding how much unconscious, emotional, inner work or trauma work is left to do on the personal growth journey. And I can elaborate a little bit about that if it's not super clear.
Go ahead. You perfectly fine.
So I would say that the symptoms, let's say, of lack of focus can come from three major areas.
Okay.
One major area is the sense of purpose. If we have a strong sense of purpose, we're going to be more focused on achieving that purpose. If we have the skills of flow, we're just going to be able to focus more easily. But there's a third component, which is emotions and unconscious work and maybe trauma work. And this is where if one is procrastinating because of fear of judgment, because of perfectionism, because of believing that they are not enough, this is where the unconscious inner work comes in. And you can't really know of a symptom like lack of focus, how much is due to a lack of skills versus how much is due to fears unless we train the skills. So that's where what I do comes in. It takes care of the training of the skills piece, and that leads to a new situation which might create a light on the situation about how much inner work there is from the unconscious.
Something that stood out when you had said we have symptoms, some of us that haven't been diagnosed with ADHD, we have symptoms of ADHD, and that they're like, okay, with what all we got going on for is all in our TV streams, our phones, social media, and so forth, it definitely kind of puts you in an ADHD state, especially with these platforms wanting you to stay on their platforms or give you those dopamine fixes and everything to stay on there. So definitely you navigating, definitely where you navigating them away from that and so forth. So, and where they can be more productive and everything, that definitely speaks volume. So I'm glad you shared that with us today on that. Now, is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't covered today?
I'm glad you mentioned the dopamine aspects of technological companies and even modern marketing. There's a whole field that is called neuromarketing, and it's basically leveraging neuroscience and neuroscience-based insights in order to hack your brain to get your attention. Like, we are in the attention economy right now. There is too much out there to pay attention to, and companies are paying millions of dollars in order to get your attention. Flow is the antidote to that, because it will help you understand dopamine better, and it will help you make those choices on a day-to-day basis of, am I going to dial up my dopamine right now with this activity, or am I working on something that is deeper, more meaningful, or something else that is more conducive to my lifestyle goals and grander purpose? So managing this is all a part of flow.
Okay, cool. So that definitely, like, I think it is needed, because we do have those outlets that we need from time to time, but too much of it, definitely can be a hindrance in a lot of different ways. And then even if you're not really like thinking it is something small, it definitely can snowball into something that definitely can be more detrimental to any aspect of your life and so forth. So yeah, navigating that and being aware, like you had said earlier, of what's going on can help you to avert that a lot more easier. Okay. All right. So with that said, is there anything else that you want to talk about and that we haven't disclosed or discussed today?
To share a little dopamine practical tips.
Okay, cool.
The brain evolved in such a way that it's wanting to elevate dopamine levels. That's why dopamine is involved in the addiction cycle. And back in the times that the brain developed, new information was important for survival. It was like, where do we find food? What signs in nature are helping us to survive? Where are my predators? How can I avoid them? Where's the new source of water? All of this new information, the brain registers as, it's key for my survival.
Okay.
The downside of this aspect in the modern world, because our brains haven't evolved away from this, we need to consciously cultivate the skills to protect ourselves. The new information of the modern world is all of this neuromarketing. It's all of these sources. It's all of these notifications. It's all of these dings and buzzes and beeps that our phones make, and all of these reminders and all of these automatic emails. All of this is firing up little hits of dopamine, and they're draining us. They are keeping us constantly thinking about, what else do I need to do, and keep having many tabs open. So one of the things you can do, other than minimizing the amount of exposure you get to that, is to optimize the way you create your schedule on a day-to-day basis in such a way that your dopamine levels are increasing until a break. What that means is, if there's a very low stimulating task, like reading a textbook, do that before you do the more stimulating task of creating a piece of content that is in alignment with your purpose. Because it's going to be much easier to go from the low dopamine activity of reading a textbook to the higher dopamine activity of the creative projects. And then when your dopamine levels are high and you're mentally exhausted, then it's time to take a break lunch, for example, and reduce that dopamine. So the principle is this: go from lower to higher dopamine rather than from higher to lower. Because if you go from high to low, your brain is going to want to go back to that level of stimulation. So these are some of the principles of flow science that you can implement immediately in your life and actually start seeing efficiency gains in real results.
Okay, cool, man. I'm glad you shared that good tidbit. Definitely something that's actionable and right away and everything for us dealing with the ADHD, and not only that, or having symptoms of ADHD, with what we deal with on a daily basis with social media, being at work, and on the constant grind and so forth. Okay, cool. So, all right. So if anything else, I don't want to cut you off, man. You're on fire right now. Anything else that you want to share?
Happy to end it here. Happy to connect with anyone that resonates.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one or two practical tips. I spoke a little bit about biorhythms and the morning versus evening types, and I spoke about the dopamine. That's already a good enough chunk to start putting into practice in real life. We don't want to overwhelm, and there is a lot more to the neuroscience behind getting into a flow state. And if you're curious, I highly recommend you check it out, because there is no better investment that I made in myself in my whole life than this neuroscience of flow.
Okay. And on top of that, one last thing before we get out of here. So what would you say would be the biggest takeaway that everybody can get from here, from this talk, where they're improving their focus, improving their mental focus, their energy, and their mental well-being overall? What would you say be the biggest takeaway they can get from this?
I think the biggest takeaway is really looking at the environment in which you operate. In this 21st century, technology is not going anywhere. It's only going to increase. With AI and virtual reality and robots, we're entering a new world, and our focus and our mental clutter is only going to get more complicated. So I think the sooner you learn how to leverage the skills of flow and operate in alignment with your biology, the better your life will be in the long term.
Okay. All right, let's end it there, man. So let everybody again know where they can find you and who might want your services and so forth.
Yeah. So again, my name is Anthony Palacin. You can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, by looking up my name. You can find me on the web as well at www.palacin, that's PALACIN.co.uk. It's a UK-based website. Always happy to connect, and I'm here to help spiritual entrepreneurs that are struggling with focus, struggling with mental exhaustion, whether or not they have ADHD.
Okay, cool. I appreciate you for coming on, man. Till next time, y'all, we out of here. Peace out.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, you're welcome anytime. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you enjoyed it, be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. If you're looking for fitness coaching to help you reach your goals, want to join our animated network for fitness guidance, collaborations, networking, and community, or are interested in being a guest on the show, check out the links in the description. Stay creative, stay fit, and we'll holler at you next time.